Good afternoon, board. Pleasure to be with you. My name for the record is Jess Larson, Assistant Director in the Department of Housing Services. I'm pleased to be here with my county colleagues, Chief Deputy McCrae and Kaylin Barrios of Community Corrections. We have a joint presentation to you to help provide, let me actually show you the agenda for our discussion. We want to begin by clarifying state requirements around residency restrictions for some sex offenders, and then describe for you how we would recommend proposed eligibility check procedures in our shelter and transitional housing programs to make sure that we are compliant with those restrictions that exist in state law, and next steps for the community discussions and program implementation to follow, and then go into your discussion and direction for our department team. So before I hand it off to my colleagues to give us that overview of state requirements and existing procedures in law enforcement and community corrections, let me begin by outlining the proposed procedural changes from the Department of Housing Services for our homeless system, specifically in our transitional and shelter programs. So the proposal in large is that to ensure that participants are not referred to any of our programs that where they might not be permitted to reside. We want to institute new screening procedures that would establish potential residency restrictions before individuals are referred to those programs. And specifically programs that are shelters and transitional housing where children are present or on the premises, and where children are maybe congregating in proximity. And we will describe with more specificity later in the proposal how this proposal would be implemented. But that is by and large the recommendation that we are taking from the information shared with our Sheriff's Department and Community Corrections, and ensuring that our shelter programs are consistent with those state requirements. It's been a very complex policy to understand and navigate, and I'm just so grateful for this one Washington County approach, as evidenced by my colleagues here at the table, but many individuals in this room who've helped to have these complicated conversations, better understand these requirements and restrictions in state law, and put forward these recommendations for your consideration. So it's a pleasure to pass the baton to Chief Deputy McCrae, who will go over those state requirements for some sex offenders, and then Kaylin will share more about how the Department of Community Corrections implements those restrictions with the individuals under their supervision. And then I'll be back to walk you through more of the implementation proposal.
Good afternoon, Chief Deputy McCrae. I believe you received a packet that has a little bit more detail, so I'm just going to touch on 3 bullets, basically. And if you have any questions after that, I'm happy to try and answer those as best I can. So the first one is talking about the ORS governing residency restrictions. Oregon law controls where certain sex offenders can live and where they can be present. ORS 163-476 prohibits level 3 offenders and sexual, violent, dangerous offenders from being in locations where children can regularly gather. This is a location restriction, not a distance restriction. And the role of the sheriff's office is not to decide where sex offenders live. Our role is to enforce the law. Moving on to bullet number 2, which sex offenders qualify for residency restrictions. Oregon classifies registered sex offenders in 3 levels based on their risk of reoffending. Residency and location restrictions apply to level 3 and sexually violent, dangerous offenders. These are the highest risk individuals. Level 1 and level 2 offenders have legal privacy protections, which limits us in what we can share with the public and the shelter. And then moving on to bullet number 3, there is a public registry that is operated through Oregon State Police. There's a website, but it only lists level 3 offenders. We typically can't share level 1 and level 2 information, There are certain circumstances where we can, and we can't give that information. We can't give the shelter just unlimited access to our law enforcement database. What shelters can do is check the public website for level 3 registers, and then request parole and probation status checks through community corrections. So those are the three that I highlighted. I don't know if you have additional questions that I may be able to try and answer for you.
I might have a question. I was looking, I was looking at this state statute, and it says sex offenders classified as sexually violent, dangerous offenders. That's the level 3 you're referring to, right? And then it says may not reside near locations where children are the primary occupants or users. And then there's a subsection of that law that says this prohibition applies to permanent housing and not to transitional housing. Could you clarify?
Oh, I have my lifeline here, Sergeant Kerfis, who is our resident sex offender person for the sheriff's office. So you can come up.
We always use phone a friend.
All right, I am Sergeant Colin Kerfis of the Sheriff's Office. Regarding the ORS you're citing, I believe that is a community corrections restriction and not a criminal one. So I'm not super familiar with it.
Could you give us the ORS number you were citing, Commissioner Fye?
I'll find it for you. Hold on. Your Oregon.gov, sex offender registration. That's where I was getting that information.
So were you getting it off of a
Website.
are you getting it off of a website
Yes,
or
website.
actually?
Yeah.
Could you please forward that information to Ms. Courtney Dupdry?
Yeah. Okay.
Websites often try to summarize complex matters down into a single sentence or two, and that may be what you were looking at.
Perhaps. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Not at this time.
Good afternoon, Kaylin Barrios from Community Corrections Acting Director. So what I will be talking today about is what we do within our services. So currently, supervision, assignment, and role of corrections officers, community corrections officers, we serve approximately 2,800 individuals within our department. Of that number, about 375 have active sex crimes that they are on supervision for. With that, those individuals, the majority of which are on post-prison supervision, meaning they've been released from prison and they have conditions that are guided by the parole board. They have general conditions that we follow, along with any special conditions that are based on their risk, need, crime history. From a smaller portion of that are individuals who are on probation, which is coming from the court, who have not yet been to prison, and they have general conditions along with any special conditions that have been specified by the court. In addition to that, our supervising officers, as they've gone through the supervision process, as needs arise, we may also reach out to the parole board or the court to modify those conditions, either making them more restrictive or less restrictive based on what they've demonstrated in behaviors. So managing it to ensure their needs are met, but also ensuring the community safety. For all individuals with general conditions, there is and this will be in the memo that you have, there is a piece that says that they are not to change residence without prior permission from the Department of Corrections or a community or a county community corrections agency. Those are state guidelines that we follow. The residency is determined to be within 1,000 feet if the individual has restrictions related to minors. So they aren't able to be in a place within or reside in a place within 1,000 feet. So with that, when they receive their conditions, they're made aware of this and they sign and acknowledge that they'll abide by those conditions. So while we enforce the conditions, we also lean into the individual to say, we want to make sure that you're aware of it and you acknowledge that this is your responsibility. Level 3 sex offenders are the only justice involved individuals that we work with that automatically have a no minors contact, which can be modified through the probation officer and parole board or court if it is determined that that's not a concern related to their behaviors. And in addition to that, they'll add safety planning and measures around it to ensure that that's modified appropriately. Let's see, what else? So as far as housing and shelter, currently what we have in place as far as options is the coordination that we've done with housing thus far. We have 2 housing liaison within our probation and parole division and 1 within our community corrections center division. So the housing liaison works with the individuals within our department, the employees in our department, to link people to housing that's appropriate based on their needs. In addition to that, we've started a stabilization program within the Community Correction Center for individuals who are struggling to find housing and may have additional barriers or risks associated with their behaviors, their crimes, or a lack of housing opportunities that they might find. So we work with them programmatically to help them also find it in that capacity. That's all I have. If anybody has any questions, unless anybody has questions.
Not at this time.
Thank you, Kaylin. So we'll get into sort of the details of our proposal that we're bringing forward for your board's discussion today. So first, let me begin with the purpose of our shelter and transitional housing programs, because this part of state statute and the implementation procedures that Chief Deputy McRae and Interim Director Barrios were describing aren't specifically designed and prescribed for shelter programs or transitional housing programs. And speaking to your question, Commissioner, we also learned that there are gaps in some of the state statute and transitional housing for certain kinds of systems, like the criminal justice system is defined and described differently than it would be described in our homeless services system. So this is where we needed to create a proposal for our Washington County homeless services system, specifically to our shelters and transitional housing programs, that would adhere to the intentions of these state requirements around residency restrictions. But before beginning to do that, we also need to align ourselves on the designed purpose and intent of our shelter and transitional housing programs, which are to reduce unsheltered homelessness by giving places for people to come inside and get support and care rather than being outside because of the barriers that they're experiencing. So there is real attention into the way our programs are designed to make sure that we aren't creating additional barriers for people who are unsheltered and creating broad accessibility and unencumbered access to our shelters, which is why this conversation requires so much consideration. Additionally, all of our funders, the federal funding we receive through the Continuum of Care of HUD, our state funding we receive from Oregon Housing Community Services, and our regional funding we receive from Metro require that our programs are intentionally designed to create low barrier or broad access to our shelter programs. So these considerations must be held in the forefront as we move forward in drafting these procedures for our shelters to be in alignment with these state restrictions on residency for certain sex offenders. Next, I'll move into how we are recommending that we might define the application of these residency restrictions at certain facilities. So our proposal, as you'll see in the memo, describes that at the time a shelter is cited, and at the time that your board directs this policy going forward, staff will take a look at the features of each shelter and transitional housing program to determine if children are on the premises or if children may congregate at facilities in proximity to the location of the shelter, and establish that consideration for an additional screening requirement for those programs if they are in proximity or if they do have children on the premises. And I'll describe more of that in a moment, but the point here is that this would happen at the time of siting because there could always be changes to our neighbors, and we want to make sure that we can continue to provide the accessibility of our service system that the board has designed us to implement. Next, the proximity would be determined by door to door. So there's some recommendations we received from our land use and transportation colleagues about how to create a consistent methodology for measuring the distance. And the recommendation we're putting forward is the entrance to the facility in proximity to the entrance to the nearest child care or school facility. And that's the second element here, is that we are defining the places where kids congregate to measure the distances from our shelters as child care centers and school facilities. Next, the proposal describes programmatic procedures that would be newly implemented. At this time, we coordinate our referral list centrally for the county for all of our shelter and transitional housing programs, and we will continue to do that. There is an assessment to establish need, and at the time someone is referred to those shelters, now we would add an additional step of screening for those shelters that are determined to be in proximity or have children on the premises. So that'll be an added step at the county referral level, and it will not require any additional actions to be taken by the operators of our shelter programs because it will be a screening conducted before anyone is referred to their program. So no change to the providers, essentially, is what we want to convey here clearly. Next, let's get into the details of how we are proposing defining on the premises and also in proximity. So here briefly is the list of our 4 family shelters that are funded through Washington County Homeless Services contracts. And in each of these shelters, families are eligible because they have an individual in the household who is under the age of 18, and therefore children live on the premises. So they are there's no proximity because it's on the premises, and we would recommend that each of these shelters adopt the new expected screening procedures before individuals are referred to their programs. Next, before I get into defining or establishing in proximity, this is an image that you've all seen many times in our conversations we have with the community about the wonderful prevalence of school facilities in our county. They are literally quite everywhere in Washington County. This is a map that shows the presence of schools at a quarter and a half a mile in all parts of our county. And so when we are citing shelters, it's just simply not possible, or any homeless facility, it's not possible to ensure that we aren't in proximity. And so that is, again, why we are bringing this conversation to you for your careful consideration, because we know that it's your board's direction to make sure that we have a system that can respond to the emergency of unsheltered homelessness. And we also need to make sure that we are being mindful in creating community safety and complying with residency restrictions.
Before you move on,
Yes.
why did you use a fourth a mile and a half a mile? I mean, that's 1,700 feet to 30 feet or to 2,600 feet when none of the criteria uses that. It's 500 to 1,000. It says in here some are longer than that, but I mean, a quarter and a half a mile seems huge.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that point. I'm sorry, I was using this as a referential data point as established research that had been done by the department for previous community conversations. It was not specifically used for this conversation. And you're right, a half a mile is approximately 2,500 feet, so a quarter of a mile is less than 1,000 feet. So apologies, we did not have time to conduct additional research at 500 and 1,000 feet.
Well, actually, a quarter of a mile is about 1,300 feet.
Thank you.
I mean, it does demonstrate a point.
Yeah. Well, to me, it wasn't a good I'll wait for the rest of the presentation. It just didn't resonate with me that that was a good comparative analysis when we're talking 500 to 1,000.
No, as she said, it isn't being used for comparative analysis. It's just illustrative of the point that we've had to make in many shelter citing open houses that people ask, well, why is it so close to schools? Why can't you find some other place? And the fact of the matter is, the smallest unit many people think of is a quarter mile, and this illustrates the presence of schools throughout Washington County. That's the only use of this. Questions come up before about schools.
Thank you for the clarification and appreciate the point, Commissioner. So now we are moving into proximity, and our proposal is that for our shelter facilities that are outside of 1,000 feet, they not be considered as being in proximity. And we'll say more a little bit about why, but these are those 4 shelters that we have in operation. The closest school facility or childcare facility is beyond 1,000 feet. And so our recommendation is that there would not be additional screening criteria before individuals could be referred to these facilities, because they do not have children on the premises and they are not in what we're recommending is immediate proximity to a place where children may congregate. However, there are 3 facilities where the board may choose to determine that these do meet the definition, and we do want to create additional screening recommendations or screening procedures before referring individuals. The first facility is 626 feet from a child care facility. And that facility is over 500 feet, but it would be within 1,000 feet and could be considered for having additional screening. And the other 2 facilities happen to both be our transitional housing facilities that are currently under development and will be opening soon, I believe later this fall and in the next calendar year. And these facilities have a school, these future facilities will have a school facility less than 500 feet, 300 feet in one case and 366 feet in the other, in proximity. And so we are recommending that the board consider either a proximity distance of 500 feet or 1,000 feet that would then include additional screening at these facilities because of that proximity. I do want to mention, well, let me describe this first. The reason why our staff is recommending your consideration of either is because 500 feet would align with our time, place, manner standard, which does set a proximity distance that camps cannot be on public property within 500 feet of an existing shelter. So it's unrelated to residency restrictions for sex offenders, but it's a description of an example of proximity used in our shelter programs. And the reason the board might consider 1,000 feet is, as Interim Director Barrios described, that is the distance restriction often used by their department when working with individuals under supervision with residency restrictions. At 500 feet, I showed you that it would include, the limitation would include 2 facilities, and they would total 124 transitional housing units. And at 1,000 feet, that would include 3 facilities that would have these additional restrictions on top of the family shelters for a total of 184 shelter beds or transitional housing beds. And it is worth just underscoring that this does at this time include, the recommendation either way includes both of our transitional housing facilities in our county system. So that is also for your consideration. And as I move you into your questions and discussion, I missed this in my opening talking points, but I do just want to stress the importance of this difficult discussion and difficult policy work stemming from our community engagement work and feedback we've heard from our community. And while those conversations have been challenging, they are also appreciated because they help us do better work in communicating and understanding state policy, partnering with our colleagues, and being consistent as a county, and being responsive to the community and their concerns. We believe there is a way to both ensure the support of safety in our communities as we bring these new facilities into neighborhoods, but also upholding the tenets and purposes of our shelter programs by creating broad access so people can get in from outside and get that support they need onto long-term stability. So we look forward to your discussion. Happy to take any questions you have along the way. And ultimately, we do want to receive your direction so we can communicate the path forward to our community at the next engagement meeting, which is Wednesday the 17th in a week and 1 day. So our specific questions for you is, as a board, are you in support of these proposed restrictions, residency restrictions applied into our shelter and transitional housing programs? And do you recommend us implementing a 500-foot or a 1,000-foot residency restriction? Thank you.
Okay, now is the time. It goes over to the board. So who would like to go first with regard to any questions or comments?
Right, yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Snyder.
My note here. I appreciate all the work that the teams have done on this. I know I acknowledged that during briefing, but I want to say it again here. I know I had provided some challenges around this early on a number of months ago, and I think you guys have really risen to the occasion as the whole team. With that said, answering your specific questions that you've posed, I do support the restriction procedure that's been described, and I personally would recommend 1,000 feet for a whole bunch of reasons. One, it's more conservative and is therefore easier for me to defend, and it also aligns. I think aligning with the community correction standards makes more sense than aligning with our camping time, place, manner restrictions on camping. So the entirety of my thoughts, but just a big thank you for the amount of effort that's been put in and the thoughtfulness of team members in the One Washington County team.
Bye, go ahead.
I can go next. That way, make the loop. Jess, I've had a great briefing with you and the team, your team. So I want to express my gratitude for educating me. And more importantly, you know, we've heard from a lot of survivors that really came and shared their stories and compelled us to move into this direction. So I appreciate you listening and coming up with something that perhaps nobody's happy with, but is a compromise. So I intend to weigh in on. I just not sure if I'm ready right now because I do want to understand like the state laws that we're following in terms of, I've heard the sheriff's side, and then there was the community corrections. And I did find the rolled up and I did find them and share the link with Courtney. So I do want to understand and pause a bit and probably have a discussion about which law we're following to exclude people from the service. Is it the sheriff's or is it the community corrections? Because so I'll pause right there. I think you have an answer.
Thank you for the question. We appreciate it. And we've learned a lot together. So I believe we have an answer to prepare for you. The state law requires that or establishes residency restrictions for all level 3 offenders. However, that residency restriction is only specific to when children are on the premises. That restriction does not extend to, on the premises. It does not extend to any proximity. In the case of offenders who are under supervision through community corrections, the state law directs local corrections office to establish procedures and encourages them to establish residency restrictions in proximity to facilities. And in Washington County, our corrections department has established 1,000 feet. However, these two policies don't apply to all of the offenders and all of the circumstances. So what our proposal is for our shelter programs is to, as Commissioner Snyder described, kind of take the more conservative approach and use the public registry screening for all level 3, and also do a check with our community corrections officers, or community corrections department, to inquire if any individual is under their supervision with residency restriction. So we are applying both a proximity and on the premises to all of the above. This is an example where the state law is not exactly clear, and we need to establish procedures that are clear for our shelter providers, and this is what we are recommending.
Okay, which is what would make sense for our county. And okay, you know, when we started this journey, like I've was concerned about, you know, people who commit crime against kids, crime against the elderly, and obviously sex offenders. And then, but I've always envisioned, I won't call it like, not categorizing it, but somewhat of a structured, individualized risk assessment process. And it sounds like what you're describing is creating our own assessment process, individualized, but rather use some structures that exist currently.
Precisely.
Okay. Now that I follow. The other concern I had was sort of this idea, and I've said it before when we were having this conversation early on, to sort of come back with something that could work for the neighborhoods that are voicing concern. But, you know, what I said was I didn't want it one size fits all model, and something that didn't also comply with the housing first strategy. So could you help me understand this? It's this one size fits all exclusion policy, which then means that is not following best practices.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. What we are confident, why we are confident in making these recommendations, is we understand our expectation as implementers of a homeless system to create housing first options for individuals who come to our system. And so this proposal creates options for individuals who might have residency restrictions at some facilities, but will still have options to be served in other facilities.
Right. Thank you. And then the last question I have is, I think I gave myself some bit of a homework and really looked at like Denver and some other cities where there was a best practices. What other jurisdictions have you compared to make this suggestion?
Well, we've consulted our peers, we've consulted the state, we've consulted our colleagues in Multnomah County, and frankly, I think in many cases, county systems defer to the operations of the shelter providers. And what we heard loud and clear from your board is we wanted to establish clear procedures and a standard for our system in Washington County. So we've taken the examples of how other shelter operators and other systems have navigated, but really relied on the existing requirements and restrictions and procedures of our partners at Community Corrections to put forward this recommendation. We consulted our colleagues at Multnomah County. They do not have any such residency restrictions in any of their shelter or transitional housing programs across the board. They don't require that at the county level, though they may allow for it in operations by the shelter providers.
And then I have two more things, and then I'll end, Chair Harrington. One of the question I got from communities were, wait a minute, is Washington County now punishing people for their past? Especially folks who are making amends. You know?
Right. Well, in truth, many people who experience homelessness are in our system because society punishes people after they are returned from any correctional facility or many other reasons. People are limited in their housing actions for financial, mental health, and criminal justice history reasons. So we see our role and responsibility as helping individuals to overcome those limitations. And here in this case, that is why this proposal is not proposing any new residency restrictions. It is leaning on the existence of residency restrictions that already are in place for certain sex offenders.
And thank you. The last thing I want to bring voice to, also from the community, is to, one of the things that they wanted to the staff to take away was to make sure that we continue to have appropriate screening supervisions in these buildings, that we have staffing, and we are also being amenable to our placement protocols to protect both the residents and the neighborhoods. That's one message that a community member wanted to send. So in terms of these questions, I'll answer. I think it's, I'm glad where you landed in the recommendations that you bring forward. I think the challenge with the 500 is there are more people that are excluded. And the 1,000, there's less people. So if I understand correctly with the materials here,
The other way around. With the
yeah, I said it correct. Yeah, Chair. The other way around. With 500 feet, the policy would also restrict residency in 124 transitional housing beds, as opposed to 1,000 feet. The policy then would restrict residency at 184 medical shelter and housing transitional beds. And there's a minor question baked into what. Oh, I see it. Never mind. I answered my own bridge shelter. So I think it provides more access. There are more beds available with 1,000 feet versus the 500. So I will be supporting the 1,000 feet recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd like to clarify. I believe what you're recommending is limiting our screening to facilities within 500 feet because that would impact fewer shelter beds.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So you're a 500 foot person. I think that's
Because
clarification. I was hearing the same thing.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we had this briefing. I think I've asked the same questions as I did. Yes, I want to do the 500.
Thank you.
I can go next. Thank you for this work. I appreciate it. I appreciate the One Washington County approach, bringing in a variety of different resources to look at this, and I appreciate the ongoing communication with our community. I think that that's really the key here, and I appreciate the community's response, consistent response in relationship to what the issues are, and the support of the project while working at mitigating risk. And that's how I would clarify this. I'm very much in support of the residency restriction procedures that are proposed here. And I also recommend that we minimize the impact on the number of beds that we have. So, but at the same time, I think that there's a density issue on what the impact is, and I think maybe that should be taken into consideration. And what I'm saying is, if there are 2 or 3 childcare facilities or schools that are in that area, maybe there's a different approach. And I don't know if what flexibility we might be able to create in this, but I leave that to you. I again want to stress, we need to provide these services as we move forward. And I think that there's generalized support for providing these services. And thank you for the work to get us to the point where we provide these services. while we engage the community and while we look to making sure that we address the potential risk. So thank you.
So on question number 2, are you 500 or 1,000? You said minimize the bed impact, so that tells me
500 by
500.
that?
Yeah.
And Commissioner Fye, you said 500, but on the first question, you're a yes as well, right? I didn't hear you say.
Yeah, I wasn't a yes in the beginning, but through this dialogue, you helped me understand what
Yep.
individualized risk
That's
assessment
well
was
said.
following.
Commissioner Willie.
Yeah, just like everybody else, I really appreciate, especially the one-on-one we had. It was a good conversation, so thank you for that. And I also appreciate the conversations we've had with the communities, especially in the Cornell project. It's been a good dialogue. It hasn't been caustic. And that's why I think we are where we are here today. So yeah, I would like to reach out to that group and say thank you for your diligence on this, but also just by the demeanor that we had during that period of time. So I'm a yes on the first one, and I'm 1,000 foot on the second one.
Thank you. I want to come back to the letter. I believe the letter from these 4 different service providers is rejecting the proposal outright because they would like to see, this is in my words now, they would like to see, they say, reject the proposed screening policy. And then stick with everything is low barrier. I don't see that as a solution because with regard to residency in these shelters, we have to comply to state law, as you've put very simply multiple times. So we do have to comply with the residency restriction. The question is about the proximity, and you've been very clear about how proximity might apply. I did struggle with the proximity distance question, just as some of my colleagues have. While I don't like having to live with the difference between 500 and 1,000, I think that we will be better served if we have consistency with community corrections. As you say, the camping time, place, or the no camping time, place, and manner was put together to deal with homeless camping, on sidewalks, in streets, and to make sure that as we have shelters, we're ensuring that we can't have additional homeless camping around these shelters as part of our neighborhood relations. So, so it's a different set of circumstances than the way our public safety and justice system operates. I have also appreciated as you have followed our direction very much so and very well to do this exploration and find out where the grounding circumstances are. And that has taken time, and also applying it across our whole system. So it's been hard for some of our community members to sit week after week, month after month, and be frustrated because they don't see us taking some action or having this further discussion today. But this is what we have to do as thought leaders, as elected officials, to ensure that we are making decisions with the best available information, with that comprehensive view. So thank you. We couldn't do this today without your work. And I appreciate it. And as Commissioner Willie put it far more eloquently, thanking everyone for their patience as well. So yes to the first question on the proposed residency restriction. And like it or not, for the sake of consistency with community corrections, I'm going with the 1,000 foot. So where that leaves us is all board members support the new policy, but we have 3 of us embracing the 1,000 foot versus the 500 foot. So that's where we're at. So we've got a board majority at 1,000 feet.
Thank you so much for this discussion and your patience with us as we've struggled through this technical information and your clear direction. We look forward to putting these procedures into place and bringing this information to our community as we continue the conversations with our new shelters.
Great.
Thank you, board.
So your next steps are clear about establishing those procedures and begin implementing them starting September 1st. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there another, just so I'm tracking, is there another action that will come to us around these, or is this the end of the line for the board's involvement?
Thank you for that question, and I'll defer to the chair, but our understanding is that because we're seeking direction from the board that will be implemented through programmatic procedures, we needed your direction here, but we don't need you to take official action.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we've gone just a few minutes over, and I'm just mindful of that, as I hope all my colleagues will, because we have a few different, 4 or 5 different more topics to go. So we'll switch over to a current fiscal year 26, year-end supplemental budget. And welcome to our Chief Financial Officer, John Steyer.
Good afternoon, board. Chair. We're with you today just to talk about the year-end supplemental. So the context of our supplemental process is, of course, to be transparent in the actions that we take in our budget process and make sure we make proper adjustments through your board's guidance. The law allows us to make modifications to the budget through supplemental process, and that's what we're doing today. This is the 4th supplemental for FY 25-26. We had one in the fall. In December, we did a new chart of accounts supplemental. And then we had the spring, and this is the final one for the fiscal year. So there are 15 adjustments to the budget. Let's start with the top right. The miscellaneous technical adjustments is item number 15 at the back. This was the same technical adjustment that we approved in the 26-27 proposed budget that we did just a couple weeks ago. So we did it for 26-27. This is correcting that same alignment for the current year's budget. And then the second item there, which is item number 1, this is recognizing the allocation of $450,000 from contingency to support the board declared states of emergency that were declared this fiscal year. The actions were done earlier this fiscal year, and those funds reinforced food assistance after SNAP distributions disruptions and expanded services for immigration and refugee communities, including prior allocations to the Oregon Food Bank and nonprofit service providers. Item number 2 was a COVID response and recovery fund. So the facility's HVAC is progressing faster than anticipated. So this is good news. We want to get these expended by the end of the fiscal year, and so we're moving up $4.2 million into this fiscal year that was programmed in next fiscal year.
Almost all of the work will be done by the end of the month.
Wow.
This is a big deal.
Quality work at that.
Yeah.
More for facilities, fleets, and parks. Item number 3. And this adds $767,000 to fleet services due to higher than normal vehicle maintenance and supply costs following the COVID delays. Inflation, rival parts of vehicles caused the over expenditure or the higher cost. And so funds are being captured from contingency and also from an adjusted beginning fund balance to cover these costs. Item number 4. This is a $2.8 million of capital paid capital space lease was moved from the facilities operations fund to the facilities capital projects fund to comply with GASB 87. And that's the Government Accounting Standards Board.
As much as I love baseball, I don't believe our facilities or parks takes care of any baseball fields. So just comment.
So
Commenting on the picture.
typically Brenda comes up with our amazing photos. I'll have to ask her.
Yeah. I like having a parks picture, but I don't think.
Well, I'm
baseball's
sure.
us.
I'm sure there was a reason, but we'll look into
Was
it.
the ball fields just in general? Is that-
Yeah,
We don't
that's the next topic.
take care of any.
That is the next topic.
Out of the park.
There you go.
A home run.
Yeah. So this item, the expenses were moved in 23, 24, and 24, 25, and so this moves the revenue associated with those expenses. Under public safety and justice, we have local option levy in the jail, recognizing the body worn camera lease program under GASB 87. So this allocates both the revenue and expense for those costs that will incur going forward for the lease of those body worn cameras. Item number 6 is also public safety program management. So we're recognizing $2 million in new property tax revenue from the anomaly AV this year. It also allocates appropriations for expenses incurred to conduct surveys and pay postage in support of our local option levy ballot measure that we had in November. Item number 7 is community development home program and adds $1.65 million in federal HUD funded expenditures and matching revenue to cover rising project workloads, personnel costs, and increased activity in both home and home ARPA programs. Item 8 is a veteran services program. It increases funding by $10,389 to reflect a new grant for suicide prevention, outreach, and additional carry forward grant revenue. Item 9 is the Agency on Aging. Adds $300,000 in general fund transfer to eliminate a projected negative ending fund balance and create contingency buffer for year-end revenue timing issues caused by deferred revenues, investment losses, and administrative costs not fully covered by the grants. And this is one that's related to a FY24 audit finding where we've had some funds that had negative fund balances at the end of the year. And so this helps to correct for that this year as well as for next year.
And hopefully ensure future years' practices don't do that anymore.
Correct. Correct. The Housing, Health, and Human Services. Item number 10. This public health increases the budget by $922,000 based on new intergovernmental funding that supports the solid waste program under the Recycling Modernization Act. Also expanded WIC, peer counseling and service capacity, and also the public health emergency preparedness initiatives. Item number 11 transfers $83,000 from the Mental Health House Bill 2145 fund to support a revenue shortfall in the beer and wine tax program. And item 12 transfers $6.6 million from Prevention Treatment Recovery Fund to cover the cost for the Center for Triage Addictions, Triage and Treatment project. This ensures resources align with expenditures housed in the Behavioral Health Fund. Item number 13 is for the deflection program. This moves $92,000 from the contingency to cover higher than budgeted personnel costs, peer mentor service contracts, and cost allocation. And then lastly, the ITS capital budget projects recognize $14 million in subscription-based IT arrangement programs we call SPIDA, revenue and expenditures in accordance with GASB 96. So this ensures accurate accounting for large IT subscription contracts by recording the full contract value within 25-26. Some examples of these include Workday, Unit Solutions, which does our Questica budget software, CDW Government, which is Citrix renewal, and there's some web-based case management system software. There are about a dozen or so different software agreements that go into this. That's a quick overview of Supplemental. So any questions you might have on those items?
Just quickly on deflection, I see the cost allocation plan. Was that the change to the cost allocation plan or including it at all in the deflection program from your?
I think it's just maybe the costs that were higher than were
That
rated for that. Yes.
The costs were higher.
Yeah.
From the plan.
It was also a matter of timing because the grant funds didn't come in until September,
Yeah, right.
and we'd already approved the budget. Program. Any other questions or comments? I'll just close with thank you, John, for taking my call and answering the questions with regard to the items that were in our packet prior to yesterday. Job well done, and it's good to have all this followed up on and in our rear view mirror. Yes, yes.
Great.
So we'll have the public hearing at the meeting June 16th, which you'll be chairing. I'll be on Zoom, but you'll be presiding over that meeting and all the different public hearings.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, you'll wear out your public hearing call.
Big day.
Yeah, yep. Great. All righty. So John's going to stay with us and join Ann over on the next topic, which is the transient lodging tax update.
So I'd love to have a ton to say here, but John's been really doing the work. This goes back to how we've been making our HOPS payment. We had a discussion with you about a month ago. We didn't finalize that discussion, and we're now getting to the close of the year. So we need to actually close that out so that going into the budget, into our payments for next year, we're able to make those accurately. So John's going to walk you through the options, what we've learned, and then we'll proceed.
Yeah, still a lot to learn, and as I keep digging into this, I always find more, but I think I'm getting closer to understanding the entire issue. This is a little bit harder than doing the year-end supplemental.
Now, every time you touch it, John, you'll have to refresh your mind and go back to your notes because it's messy.
I do. I'm trying to clean it up. Hopefully this will help today to answer some questions, but I do have 2 questions today. So we talked last time about different options. One of the questions I have for the board is, would you consider adjusting the repayment for tranche 1 and then going back and withdrawing tranche 2, which is a larger tranche and pay directly from SIP? And I'll talk through some of the numbers here. And then also a second component of TLT revenue that is lacking per se, and that's the amount that goes to pay for the debt service for the 2016 bonds that we have. And so that was projected at a higher growth rate than what is happening, and so the money's not there for that. So I'll talk through those. This is the background that we've been through. February 24th, we had the R&O to authorize the use of TLT for the City of Hillsborough project for the ballpark, and here's where we should have the baseball on the screen. May of 24, we made an agreement with the City of Hillsborough to make the payments in full on or before 30 June 27. Any payments after January 26, we pay a 4% interest. Our plan in this budget upcoming is to make that payment on 1 July, the final payment. The total interest we'll have paid will be $106,000 on the $8 million to Hillsborough. And then on 4 March, we awarded the grant to Washington County Visitor Center Association. The intent was to have the grant have caps in it. So the savings from those caps to the ETV would be able to be applied to the payments for this Hops ball field. All right. Our last meeting, Commissioner Willie asked a question, good question, about trying to simplify the amounts and where they go. And we talked about the original 5% of TLT, the second 2% in 1985, and we had an additional 2%. And then in 2006, we had another 2%. So on the left-hand side dollar bill, I tried to articulate where the money goes and the source of it. So the first 5%, 4.5% of that is unincorporated Washington County TLT, and 51.5 is incorporated. And so the 4.5 is kept for the county, and the 51.5% is split 50-50 between us and the cities. The next 2%, we had 11% of that goes to the Washington Fairgrounds, and 11% of the total dollar to ETV. The final 2% went toward tourism, ETV, and also debt service. And so that's the debt service component. And so on the right-hand dollar bill, you can see where that ends up in the funds. About 30% of a dollar, 30 cents on the dollar goes to general fund, 26% goes to cities, 11% to the fairground operations at county fair, 26% to ETV, and that's the component we were trying to cap to make the payments, and then 7% to debt service for the event center.
This is a great set of graphics.
Yes.
Thank Sherry. Yeah. So that's how it slices up.
That is, it takes us out of percentage alphabet soup and makes it much clearer and concrete.
Does.
Well, and we can note that for future presentations. So we'll just hold on to this graphic because I think you're right. It's really made it easier to understand.
The only thing I would suggest is on the 30% general fund, it's county general fund because cities have general funds
Right.
too.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So
Next slide, you're going to have to explain what the red, green, and yellow.
yeah, okay. So this is my red, green, yellow. So when we talked last time, we brought 5 options in.
Oh,
And the board did not want to do 1 and 2. They preferred number 3, and then number 4 and 5 we could consider later. That's what I took out of it.
okay, okay.
And so we agreed not to modify the percentage on the current contract with ETV, and that runs through 2029. So beginning in 2030, we could look at the next increment of contract with them to find some savings if we want to pursue that. The second option was what I had put in the budget, was to maintain the repayment plan, to just reduce our general fund transfer, which is the 30% on the right-hand dollar bill that we saw on the last slide. And so we said we don't want to do harm to general fund. So the next step would be to revise the payment schedule and lower payments earlier in the payment cycle. And so I'll walk through some of the numbers on that in the next couple of slides. And then, of course, the other 2 options, one is to make one or both payments direct from SIP and not have an interfund loan. And then the longer term would be to increase the TLT tax. And if you did that, approximately $1.8 million would be raised in with a 1% increment. And if you take 30% of that, that'd be about $540,000 that could go toward this initiative.
And you're going to recommend one of these at the end of this, correct?
I am going to recommend one of these.
But does option 5 require a vote from the people?
Requires a change in municipal code. I don't think it requires a vote. And we had talked about this. No.
We've gone back and forth about it, and we would, no, here's why. So it's called a tax, but it's actually in our ordinance a fee. And so that's why we get into this back and forth about whether or not it is a tax or a fee. The general consensus we got from Marina is that it does require a vote.
So we should just say that.
Yep.
Okay.
I believe that's accurate, and I believe the cities have to go through the same process when they want to raise their TLT. It has to be voter approved,
Correct.
which generally voters don't mind taxing somebody else. So
It's usually approved, but that doesn't mean always, and it's still a voter approved methodology.
Thank you.
very good. And I just go back one question too. Your graph says 30% to the general fund, and now I'm confused with the new TLT legislation that allowed us to get more to general.
Yeah, so the
Is that
new,
the 30%?
the new would be going forward. So going forward, or it could be retroactive, want it to go retroactive. But the way I look at it is in the different slices. So the original 5% and the next 2% were grandfathered in before any of the restrictions 70-30 came into place. And so for some of the last 2% was elected all to go to tourism. And I don't know if that was a conscious decision based on those 70-30 rules, but that's where we sit right today.
So this graphic is not reflective of new state laws.
That's what I
Right,
think. That was
right,
my question.
right.
So
Yeah, thank you.
this is as it was in our current budget and what we've got in our proposed budget for FY '27.
This is actuals.
Yes.
So this is all the laws all combined into a pot, how we have been managing these funds.
I don't think the new law becomes effective until January.
Well, it also, my memory from the last conversation we had is that would actually be,
Worse.
because of what is grandfathered for us, it would make more problems. But I think to illustrate that point, Commissioner Willie may not have asked for it, but maybe the illustration of what would be under that would be a third graphic to include here.
Yeah, I guess my thinking was it would apply, we could apply it only going forward, or we could choose to apply it retroactively.
To everything.
to
Then
everything.
it applies to everything.
Correct.
And I think that's the choice we have. The breakout that we have now, if that's more beneficial than to our needs.
I think we can come up with a graphic that just shows how that slides. We can talk to Sherry about doing that. The other piece of this is it's the same conversation for a future board on whether or not they would want to, how they'd want to apply it. So it would be useful at that time as well.
Well, and I guess from my standpoint, and not understanding what the new legislation impact had on us, but knowing that 100% of our TLT money was already committed, I was not clear as to, so what's the new law allow, even though they said, well, more of it can go to general fund, but we're going, then who are we going to take that from?
Yeah, so not every government agency has all of their funds committed in the same way through the same types of IGAs and MOUs. So in those cases, those agencies have the ability to flex their dollars to meet the new law. In our case, we have them set until 2030, no matter what, I think. So there's not a lot of flexibility in that case. So it really would be if we brought in an additional tax and then a question to the board at the time of whether or not the retroactive should also apply the new percentage rate.
Okay, well, we'll get to this. I'm sure John's going to come to this because it's the last one. But if we did add a penny, then to me, that allocation of 50% could go to general fund because it's new money.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that would be taking it going forward, which I think is how we want to approach that.
Right. Okay.
I just want to follow up on the current state, top left. We said do no harm to general fund. Bottom left, we have the NFL note established, $8 million. Since the time we did that, when we set this up, we were projecting 17.9 million in revenues in TLT, and it looked like it would work. The fact is that conditions have changed and our revenues are flat. This year, we had budgeted 17.9 million in TLT revenue, and we're probably going to have about 15.6, 15.9 million come in, so about 2 million shy of what we had budgeted. So to me, that's the big crux of our dilemma on how do we fund this within the mechanism that we wanted to fund it with. Um, so the top right, we talked in our last session, April 14th. And then the bottom right is just where we stand on payments. So we currently have in our interfund loan agreement to pay back ZIP 1.1 million this year out of TLT. We have 662,000 in beginning fund balance. Anticipate only about 76,000 from the cap with the ETV contract. And so it's a projected shortfall that A, we could pay out of general fund, or B, we could revise the TLT repayment schedule. And then that goes into FY 26-27 budget, which also has the same, where we have a payback requirement and less available from the ETV contract cap and a shortfall. And so as you look across the contract period with ETV in the current fiscal years, FY 26 this year, I have a balance of 662 and 73K available from the cap. Next fiscal year, I'm projecting 58K available from the cap. And then 28-29, the cap is reached. And so there's nothing extra to add to the payments. Then in 2030, we would have to look at a new contract period with ETV and decide if we want to continue that same mechanism. And so trying to pay back a full 8 million with this cash flow is problematic. And so that's where I was projecting or asking, could we do tranche one, revise that schedule and see how those revenues come back or not? Because we'll have 2 years without payments because there's no funds from this mechanism. And then tranche two, just withdraw the loan plan and pay directly from SIP.
And just so you know, the 5.33 is in the budget from SIP this year. So it would simply be changing the fact that there would not be a repayment to SIP, but the funds are available and are budgeted.
Without affecting reserves, question mark?
Correct.
Correct.
I just wanted.
No,
to
that's
make
really,
that
that's
clear,
fair. Thank you.
because I don't want to be affecting reserves.
Correct.
We're at our minimum.
We balanced it to the reserves.
So it's a choice between interloan, which doesn't seem to be working out, or this TLT loan payment, and your recommendation is this one.
Yeah, so it's really a question on that list. It was number 3 or 4. And for our recommendation, we're saying do the repayment, as we've discussed in the past, for the ones you've already let, for the payment you've already made, but to make a straight payment from SIP and not do a repayment back to SIP for the second tranche.
The 5.23.
Correct.
But it clears up the 8 million.
It clears the 8 million, and it makes sure that we not only held true to the payments, which is our goal, those will be made either way, but also is just transparent to the next board. We're not sure what kind of revenues we're going to have. We didn't want to hand that to a new board and ask them to try and figure that out.
Yep.
So it just ends this decision with this board. Thank you.
But it also says this decision says in 2030, there's going to be an ETV conversation or contract that's going to probably look different.
We're going to have to look at how the revenues trend over these next couple of years, if they're coming back up or not. And then in 2030, with the new contract, we may have to do that to recover the first tranche.
The alternative at that time would be that that board decides not to do a repayment. So that's one option. Or the second is that you could let the additional penny or whatever that amount is and move forward with additional revenues coming in from TLT. So there are a couple of options at that point that don't necessarily reserve impacting ETV.
Wait a second. I'm really slow today. If we did the TLT loan repayment, that takes care of the 8 million.
So right now we've talked about the repayment to the SIP as number 3. That's what we were going to do for the full 8 million. We're now adding instead looking at, sorry,
Sorry, come up here, this one.
I'm just looking at slide 8.
Right.
This tells me if you do it this way, it gets it done and we're done.
it does get it done and we're done, but the repayment is still coming back to the SIP for the 2.6 million.
Right.
Oh,
So we still have
Pull
to,
that off, we may have to revise the ETV contract in July of 2030.
Yeah.
well, we have a marker in the contract anyway. And so we'll just be doing it based upon actuals, irrespective of that or not.
Correct.
So,
I mean, that's also a long ways off. We don't
It
know
is.
what's going to happen. I will say this is probably a topic that should be added for like, maybe not in the first 3 months, but in the first year, there needs to be new board orientation on this.
well, and this should be a budget conversation each year. Where do we stand on this?
Yeah.
Room?
True too.
And to that point, I would prefer that we do this earlier with that new board because I don't want it to appear as a surprise at any point in time. Like
Yeah.
you didn't tell us this.
The middle
like,
of the budget
Yeah.
would not be a good time for that. You're right. I
So,
forgot about the budget
yeah,
timeline of that.
I just think it's important to highlight this. We're fully aware of what we're doing here. We want you to be fully aware.
I will say, just explaining TLT to the future board will take a solid year.
I was gonna say,
Good luck with that.
conflict.
We're gonna make it simple.
please
John's
put it
doing
on
a
your
nice
list because I'm not putting it on any of mine.
Yes, we have it on our list.
Okay.
Okay, so are you comfortable with this option? Can we get a thumbs up, General?
I am.
Okay, so we're going to proceed with this, and we'll have it in the budget package for next week. So it'll just be clear, one sentence. Do we need to how do we want to do that?
We'll
find a solution.
Yeah,
We'll
well,
make sure that this is clear in the direction.
I think what you're seeing play out on my face is I support the recommendation, but I'm still wrestling in my head. If I was in their shoes, what is the cost of doing it this way versus other things? Because there's a lot of liabilities in their column, and I'm just wearing that sweater for a few more minutes. I still feel thumbs up on this recommendation. I just needed a few more minutes.
From a partnership perspective, I think it's fair that ETV at least be told if this is the direction we head.
Sure.
They should at least know that this was discussed and that 2030 is I mean, I think they already know that, but they should.
yes.
I want to make sure we're continuing to be good partners. And if that means me talking to their executive director, I'm happy to do that, but I think it might be better and more appropriate coming from the
reach out.
staff team.
We can do that.
Yeah.
But I really like this graphic that helps tell that story because it talks about how the cap increases as well. It isn't just once and done.
So to codify this,
Yep.
I have to do an R&O to revise our repayment plan for tranche 1, so I can codify it in that
Perfect. We can do that.
document. And I'll do that on the 23rd of June in that board meeting.
That's perfect. And then we'll make the payment. The reason this matters is we'll make the payment at the start of the new fiscal year.
Right.
Thank you.
So do we need, you'll bring any appropriate action at the right times?
For consent agenda.
And then, but we'll get it taken care of pretty soon.
Yes.
Okay.
Just the other issue on the ELT revenue is the event center debt service. And so there's a plan in place that the 2016 bonds were provided for the event center and other listed projects and different elements throughout the county. Portion that the TLT was paying for the event center and their forecast was projected to grow at 5% per year in their revenue. And of course that has flattened. And so in this current upcoming budget, we determined about $820,000 per year would be needed to offset these costs going forward. And so we did put that in the budget that we adopted or we approved this year. But we're gonna have to look at this each year to see how the revenues come in and kind of redo it in the budget process each year to make sure we're have enough funds to support the debt service payment.
This slide gets a little confusing because the 2016 bonds with MISTIP are separate from the bonds for the 2025
2025. They
MISTIP.
are.
So,
Right. This was a different, also labeled MISTIP. In the
yeah, I
2016
know.
bond.
I know. So it's like you need to put in a little asterisk and say it's MISTIP 3. I can't remember what letter we're on.
You're right.
It was the 3D versus the 3E or something like that.
And this is another one that the future board should have a historical perspective on.
Yes,
So
I agree.
Yeah, because these decisions were done prior to
us, yeah.
us. Yeah.
When the TLT forecasted to grow by 5% per year, which I assume was done as sort of part of a business case or how we can
Right.
make this work.
Wingspan.
What time period was that projected to happen over?
That was in 2016 is when it was put together.
Right.
The bond, and it goes through 2032.
So they projected 5% growth
It did.
for almost 20 straight years.
Yeah.
With hotel expansions and other things in the plan. So you keep that in mind, that was the thought, that
Okay.
that there'd be a,
I mean, think about
I'm
it.
not saying it was right, I'm just saying that was the plan.
In the 19 and a half years that I've been an elected official, we had the Great Recession, and still the county saw a decent TLT. We had COVID and that economic difficulty. And while we saw business travel change, right, that changed, we did see a bunch of leisure occupancy. So TLT continued to increase, not necessarily at 5%. And there were a lot of hotel expansions. And now we're seeing that business travel has really continued to flatten. It didn't come back after that COVID recovery. And now we have the economic turmoil that we have with all these unofficial wars going on. And, you know, all of our economic chaos under the current administration. So times they have changed. And so they didn't have a business model. They just had a bunch of stated assumptions and forecasts. But they didn't have a business model for operating the wingspan. They had a business model for funding it through debt.
So if I could, because you've got one more question we have to answer, but if you go back to slide 5, where it's April 14, 2026 work session, it says, oops, nope, you were there. There, item 5, increase the transit lodging tax 1%. And remember, we've had this conversation. Are we talking about a penny or are we talking about 1%? Because 1% is different.
Yeah, there I'm talking about 1%. So on the other slides, we were talking percentages.
So instead of going from 11.5 cents to 12.5 cents, or do we go whatever 1% of 11.5% is? So you know,
Okay.
it's kind of like 1/11, and so that's 9. What is the number that we were talking about if we consider increasing the TLT by
1%.
1%? What
Okay.
dollar is that?
Let me think about that. I will think about
Well, it says here approximately 1.8 million.
it. It's 1.8
It's 1.8
million.
million. It's 1%, but that's 1% of.
Are you saying is that 1 penny or is that 1?
Yeah, is that 1 penny that we increase that? So we go, because it's at 11.5 now or 10.5 now.
That may be cents. It may be 1 cent equals that.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's
you may be
always
right.
the
Yeah.
confusion because
Well, and that's what I'm
actually,
trying to
our own schedules
hear.
go,
Yeah.
oh yeah, we're talking about 10 cents and 11 cents. And then we go, oh no, we got talking about 9% or 10%. You go, no, those two are not mutually the same.
Well, and then when you put it on the dollar, it is
Yeah.
equal to a cent. So I, yeah.
So
So
that
when
is
you
the-
first said that, I thought it was a penny. Then I went back and went, no, it isn't a penny.
I'll clarify that.
Okay.
But is, so, but I want to keep in line with that. If we go with your recommendation, does the future board still need to possibly consider increasing the TLT and going out to the vote?
And I think that is a board consideration, especially with the event center debt service and trying to fund this, those two things.
In the medium to long
Long
term, probably.
Right.
So that's why I want to make sure it's clear. Is it 1 penny or 1%?
Well, that's why I brought it.
asking.
So
Very
one
different amount of
penny,
money.
1 penny takes us from, let's just say, 11 and a half to
You don't
12 and a
have
half.
to answer it today. He's gonna.
That's an 8% increase. Okay,
Okay.
not a 1%.
I got you there. Okay. That makes sense. Okay.
But it is a penny.
So it's a 1 cent increase.
Which is 1% of a dollar, but not
Well,
1%.
either way.
Well, anyway, yeah, that's.
Thanks for keeping us honest.
Well,
We're way over time. No, we're not.
You are.
No.
You're over time.
We're over time. Why don't we go around the table and get the answer to your policy question?
Not there.
No, no.
Sorry, the clicker's
You're doing
late for
great.
some reason.
And almost.
One more.
One more after that.
There you
There
go.
we go. Thank you.
Would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Yes and yes. Support both.
Yes, and yes.
Two thumbs up.
Oh, I guess we could have done that
Me
one.
too.
That's good.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Unanimous.
Thank you. This is a tough one.
And by the way, my thumbs up are predicated upon good communication regarding this situation into the following board.
Totally agree.
Because we haven't been confused enough.
Well, and these are the kinds of issues, I think
Let's
what
let
we're
them figure it
reflecting.
Leave exercise to the leader.
But that's exactly what
No,
happened to
we're not
us.
gonna be.
And I think that's what
Yes.
that's what you really hear is a real commitment to making sure that clear and transparent
Yeah.
on all these stuff.
So, time for a break, 15-minute break. That'll bring us back here at 2:45, which is 10 minutes past schedule. And we only have 30 minutes for board and leadership communication and formal agenda discussion, but we don't need formal agenda discussion because we don't have a nighttime meeting or any business meeting today. So you don't get 5 minutes total each because we got 7 of us and 30 minutes. The end 15th.
Trying to get up to 100 grams of protein.
Good for you.
All right. Well, it's right here. We'll do it. Well, this doesn't detract from it. It just doesn't.
Well, welcome back, commissioners.
Okay, we're having too much fun now. We're going to get to work with board and leadership communications in 30 minutes or less. Who wants to go first?
I can go first and go fast. Yesterday, I spoke at the Washington County Sheriff's Office swearing in and recognition event, the quarterly event. That was great. Also attended the RPOC prep meeting briefing with Commissioner Willie for.
Thank you for doing that too, Jason. That's a position.
Kind of keeping track of where things are at in case I need to jump in. I have a briefing tomorrow, Friday. I have a meeting with the Clean Water Services General Manager, and then in the evening, a number of the elected officials that attended the Action Assembly at St. Anthony a couple months ago are meeting with them at their request for a follow-up. So I'll be at that on Friday evening. Monday, I have a Region 1 Act chair and vice chair meeting with the staff, and that's what I got. And I did that in under a minute.
I'll try to beat that time and say that no major updates to report today. Since our last meeting, I've been focused on emails and relevant briefings, and so that concludes my update.
I'll give an update for her. She's going to be sending her board colleagues an email to let us know if she's going to WEFTEC or not.
Yes, Chair.
Because it's still not, she's still iffy on her calendar.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Next week.
Okay, I'm not going to do a update. I will tell you that I'm going to be out of the area starting Thursday, but I will be available by phone if you need me. This is what I'd like to talk about in my brief few minutes. I talked to, we pass that on to. I've talked with Courtney and Jason Bush. This is a request for support from my fellow commissioners regarding a direction to Tanya and her staff about enterprise zones, the structure, what flexibility we might have, the details on the request. There's 5 different bullet points, and I need to get some basic information. I think all of us would benefit from this as we look toward continued response to the issues that we face. So Courtney helped me work on this, as well as Jason Bush. And as I said before, I am putting this to my peers because I recognize that it is not our role to direct the staff independently. And I'm asking for your support to make these requests.
So if I could just go down the bullets real quick. Affirm that Washington County is not a sponsor for any enterprise zones in the unincorporated Washington County areas. Great. Totally.
That's just factual.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm not expecting answers here.
Right.
I'm just, so don't, yes, but I want that foundational piece in writing.
I'm just trying to support.
Thank you.
Go through each of these bullets because we're looking for a thumbs up from the board members to get board direction on this full set. So, okay on number 1? It's a fact. Yep. Affirm that there are no data centers located in unincorporated Washington County.
Is that factually true?
Well, keep going, and there's more information.
I believe that is.
That is, yeah, because
Well, that's the best of our knowledge.
That's why I want to affirm this because there's some that spill over into unincorporated Washington.
Yeah. Affirm which enterprise zones sponsored by municipalities include property in unincorporated Washington County, which they can do. Some cities have E-zone programs which include some portion of urban unincorporated Washington County.
1 and 2 are, as written, are a little confusing and or contradictory. I think they could be easily made to work together, but right now they.
Well, not all data centers are in E-zones.
Right.
So that's why they're listed as 2 different.
He's saying we should clarify that, say, data centers.
No, number 3 is specific to E-zones.
Right, but if number 3 is true that there's,
Not all E-zones have data centers
And not all data centers
or
are
in
easy.
E-zones. That's why they're 2 separate.
So what's the message you're trying to do? Is it about E-zones or it's about data centers?
Oh, it's about gaining information so that we can position ourselves into the future on the total issue, Jerry. So, and these questions, I'm just asking for answers to these questions that gives us a basis for discussion as we move
I
forward.
understand the distinction between 2 and 3 now. I had to read it 3 times though to get there.
Okay.
Fourth one, provide information regarding whether the county can establish criteria such as number of jobs required for consent on future E-zone applications based on property that includes any portion of unincorporated Washington County.
So is that clear?
Yes,
Okay.
though I think the criteria of questions would be more than just that. I know that's
That was an example.
And provide information on the county's opportunity to develop criteria for E-zone reauthorization, specifically on projects that include properties in unincorporated Washington County.
And I do want to clarify that in talking with Ms. Duke Dreesen, the term reauthorization equals renewal. Okay, so if that helps you, if that's
Got it.
correct, Courtney? Yeah.
Oh, that's not, okay.
Do you want to have anything on here around A and T?
Sorry, I'm
That's not
still,
the same, yeah.
no,
You just said, Courtney, is not the same. Reauthorization
we had a different
renewal.
definition last week.
is
Oh,
different.
let me check with the experts.
Well, either way, I think in 5, number 5, or related to all of this is just anchoring the vocabulary.
Yes, we can do that.
I think that is like bullet number 0. Anchor the vocabulary.
Go ahead, Jason, and then I have a comment.
But now back to your point on that 5th bullet, that last bullet.
Yeah, and actually,
where we
it was almost probably past that, and that is like, do you want to ask questions about the financial impact on assessment and taxation of administering all this stuff for other jurisdictions, or is that really outside of what you're?
No, that could certainly be added to this.
Okay, that's my only sort of constructive.
Well, let's add to the list
suggestion.
then. And I want to know the cost to Washington County to process the applications for this 2-year check-in and for the annual assessment and taxation that has the application of the tax abatement year.
Yeah, to me, it'd be the
abatement period.
entire administration of this
Yeah.
program.
Well, the reason that I articulated that way is because I've now come to know that with some of these new ones, there's the application now, but the time period where it applies is out here in the future, but every 2 years in between, they have to check in and voice their intent. I guess that's what the 2-year check-in is. And then there's the actual processing of that abatement during that time period.
Commissioner Willie?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't have a problem with 1, 2, and 3.
Finding the information
go
on those.
Back to the question of what are we trying to accomplish here? Because right now, the hue and cry is primarily focused on data centers. Their use on land, lack of employment, energy, and water. That's the big four that they're talking about and beating up on data centers. The fact that they're in an enterprise zone and they get tax abatement is a little bit like the cherry on top. But, and you know, how that tax abatement impacts schools and special districts and blah, 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 a whole bunch of stuff there. But, so are we going to talk about, if we're going to talk about the problem, then let's talk about the pros and cons of the enterprise zone and what we are allowed to do and not allowed to do.
That is the question here.
But when you put data centers in the middle of it, then you've broadened the whole scope to all the other things that they're complaining about.
It's twofold for me. I want to understand all aspects of the enterprise zone.
You only have one question about data.
And data centers, it's just, that's
That's all it takes.
well, Jerry, I think that it's an important issue because that's what has driven the majority of the enterprise zones, especially in the Hillsborough area. That's why I was trying to understand that.
No,
So
that's not a true statement either.
what?
There are a number of companies in enterprise zones.
May
that
I
are not
correct
data
myself?
centers.
May I correct myself? There are significant numbers of data zones that are in enterprise zones. That's
17 to be precise.
and that's a significant number to me in relationship to what I'm trying to understand around enterprise zones and the management of enterprise zones. So that's why it is key. This is not, and I don't feel obligated to restrict my request here to one or the other. I think it's I'm looking for information, and if we collectively receive more information than what's on the question, that is not a bad thing.
So it's not going to make a difference at this juncture if you don't like that one on data centers.
Doesn't make any difference if I'm the only one that doesn't like anything.
Okay. So because of time,
No. This is a serious political discussion.
no, this is asking for information so we can then be informed by information to have further
In
discussion.
political environments. Okay, this very subject was the reason why one of our senator lost primaries, because the person beat her up on data centers. You cannot go into this. And I'm not saying we don't do our homework and we put out a fact thing. That's what I've been talking to Dan Diaz at the City of Hillsborough on. We've got to put out a factual scenario of enterprise zones and data centers. We've got to do that. So if that's what the focus is here,
That's what
I'm
I'm
all
trying to
in.
do.
Okay,
We're
but
trying to
you're
do
being
our,
a little bit more specific than just a factual overview.
so I don't care what the city of Hillsborough puts out about their enterprise zone. I've seen what they put out for their public meeting last week. It doesn't answer the range of questions that I have about what we do as a county and our role as a county. Hence, a lot of these bullets. The only question for me is I have heard that to date there are no data centers in the unincorporated areas of Washington County. Now I know there aren't any in the rural acres, so that means urban unincorporated Washington County, and I would just like to get confirmation of that to the best of our staff's knowledge. That's all. But I do have a bunch of informational questions about enterprise zones, the county's role in enterprise zones, and what, if any, criteria we might consider for enterprise zones that touch on any portion of unincorporated Washington County.
I'd also like to add to this, what are our opportunities in relationship to enterprise zones as well? So I'm trying to understand all of that piece, and that's not clear to me as I sit here now. And I think all of us would benefit from this knowledge.
And I think we would benefit from having this knowledge discussed in an open work session too.
Not to change the subject, I'll just take the pressure off of you, Commissioner Willie, so you could gather your thoughts. I think for data centers, I hear what you're saying, Commissioner Willie, around the sensitivity or the level of attention that's being paid to data centers. And I would say that with cities bringing on data centers live, the county and other jurisdictions are being robbed. So it's important that we know what we're being robbed and how much we are bearing that brunt. So, but for me, my questions have been, directly sent to Tanya in terms of like, what are the application fees? So I'm interested in knowing, the enterprise zones for data centers, the application fee versus the enterprise zones. What are the fee differences of all categories? And then the county's authority around the approval process. I think I'm trying to be careful about confidentiality and what's in a hot sheet versus what we've learned in executive. But I will say, it's important to know the authority of the approval, what gets to be approved, and whether it's incomplete or complete as well, application. So I think those are much more questions that really impact and what the board can weigh in on, and because I think it's good to affirm about the zone sponsor, but anybody that I've heard and has been paying attention really does know who the zone sponsors are. And I think in terms of the unincorporated versus the incorporated cities data centers, I think what people are asking and wanting to know is, what is the role of the county to be proactive in terms of when a property is going to be annexed to the city and that is intended for data centers? What role does the county play in that? Because, all the data centers at one point were unincorporated areas of Washington County, but they got annexed.
No,
And the cities.
the properties for data centers don't have applications for data centers until they are zoned within cities. So annexation from county to city happens way before the land use designation is applied.
So,
No,
the purpose,
debatable.
the purpose for me bringing this up today is to say, I'd like more information. I'd like to, I'm trying to follow what our agreements are in relationship to nobody makes individual requests, we make them together.
Yep.
And I'm doing this in a public way so that we all have the available information in a public setting.
It doesn't
I
need to
heard
be unanimous.
all
though.
of Commissioner Fai's questions to me are embedded in
Yes.
various parts of your written document here.
I hope so, because I don't see it that way, but I saw your Courtney as the attorney for the county council and Ann Ober. I saw your heads nod, both of you, and I trust your judgment.
So I'm actually just trying to pull us back into a conversation that'll be, that will involve staff. So we have a couple of individuals that I'd really like to bring to the table. If you would like.
Not
this
right
information-
now.
Not right now.
No,
We're just trying to get board agreement on direction to bring further.
this is
information
my
back to
effort
us.
to
100%.
engage my fellow commissioners and chair around this topic and to follow guidelines, as I mentioned before, about how and when we direct staff.
100%.
Okay, so may I ask, Chair, would you call for a thumbs up or a thumbs down on this?
Yes. So everyone who's thumbs up on moving forward with this,
Contingent on what I requested.
I don't know what you're, no, what I don't agree to the contingency unless you state it clearly. What is your contingency?
You want me to repeat everything I said earlier?
Into one crisp sentence? Yes.
Staff, could you review what I requested and what you agreed on, or what you are nodding your heads in terms of,
What I heard, Commissioner Fry, was that you had sent some emails directly to Miss Angie. We can see those. No,
No. You do not direct the county administrator to research topics without a board majority agreeing to it. What
no,
happened-
okay, so I'll start over. It's okay. I'll try to bear with me, Chair Harrington, Commissioner.
We're changing topics at 3:15, irregardless.
No, you're not. You can't, Jerry, you can't say you weren't listening and then not say, I'm not gonna listen.
I didn't.
You have to say, you have to listen.
Excuse me,
Or the other-
Commissioner
okay.
Fry.
I'm gonna
you're
repeat
accusing
what I
me
said.
of saying things I did not say.
Okay, I'm gonna repeat myself.
We're going to move on to another topic at 3:15.
And I'm telling you, I'm gonna say what I'm gonna say. If it doesn't reach 3:15, we're gonna continue.
You're not
get
gonna
to the
take
bottom.
8 minutes.
No,
I
you're
know.
not taking us to
Get my 5 minutes.
Yeah.
stop being unruly.
I'm so what I was thinking was, I think what is more prevalent and more pertinent to the community around the data centers is the idea that is very well known around the financial impact to the county. This idea that we're being robbed of when we are not being included into this financial gain for data centers within the cities. So what is one, the application fee for enterprise versus the data centers is one request that I was saying, because it's important to be transparent of like, what do we get? What is the financial contributions? And then the approval authority of the county, because yes, people know, I think it's in the statute that we are not the sponsor. The sponsor, the application sponsor starts with that city. But there's a role for us to play where, and I'm trying to be careful about executive session discussions and what's in the hot sheets. So I'm hoping that you all can read between the lines here of what I'm trying to say. But honestly, like, what is our authority? Can we, if an application is incomplete, what do we need to approve that, or do we approve that? And what is our approval authority?
And I believe that is embedded in the questions that I put forward here. And I'm going to go back to saying I'm moving this forward, and I called for a vote on this. So,
And we gave a thumbs up.
yeah. So I'd like to say now it's in administration's hands to respond.
okay, that works. And go ahead, Chair Harry.
So there's 5 minutes left. Commissioner,
2.5, you take 2.
nope. You take 2.5.
So, the only response that part of my 2.5 is that you using the term robbed is a significant abuse of what legislature allows to be done in an enterprise zone and tax abatement. So they are not robbing us. They are simply taking advantage of what legislature authorized clear back in the 80s. So stop using the term robbed, because they are not robbing. Okay.
That's,
So
that's your interpretation.
that's not your 2.5 minutes.
Okay.
So part of my awareness is that I attended the city council meeting last Tuesday night, heard about 30 minutes of complaints and concerns, and then I left. I didn't need to listen to the entire 2 hours. They're having a second round tonight at, I think it is 7:30, because they didn't have enough time to really address the issue as they wanted to. So it's coming back on tonight.
It's my understanding, I read the material in the packet. It's my understanding that the work session material presentation from staff to the city council did not happen.
That's correct. That's what I was told.
Do you know if it'll be happening tonight?
Yes.
They plan
So
to. Thank you.
last week they went into work session, but they had a couple of other things and got
Yep.
consumed. And so they never got to the meat of
Yep.
the topic. And then
Thank
the city council meeting, they were going to reconvene after the city council meeting, but that went way too long too. So they said, okay, we're going to do this again. Right. Okay. So with that real quick, I continued to meet, I think I told you this last week, with Oregon Parks and Salmonberry Trail Foundation, putting together some management agreements on the trail.
Yeah, you told us Thursday.
Yeah, and that's a continuing thing. Thanks, Jess and Molly, of course, for the update, the pre-briefing this morning, and thank you again, Jason, for sitting in on that. There's a lot there. I have Salmonberry Trail Foundation Board tonight. And let's see, SHS, of course, on Wednesday. I go to Astoria for COPAC and Northwest Act on Thursday. And then this weekend, I am speaking at the Juneteenth celebration in one of the finest plazas around in town.
We got the joke.
I'm
Is
not
that the
going to
Judy
bother
Lily
because
Plaza?
of the disrespect of this board, and I will ask leadership if you have anything you want to fit in between now and 3:15.
I do. I have just a couple of updates that I wanted to say. First, an update on the elections concerns that have been coming before your board. The Washington County Elections Division has, of course, been taking those concerns very seriously. And the agency that is charged with investigating those alleged violations of elections law is the Oregon Secretary of State. And it's their elections division. The correct path for these accusations would be for concerned citizens to file an investigation request using the form on the SOS website. We're going to send that out to the board later today so that you have access to that. We, as in the county, will also be reporting any such claims to the Secretary of State's Elections Division so that their trained investigators can conduct a thorough formal investigation. We are also sending you a quick update just so that you have that if you have individuals who are reaching out to you directly. And then the final piece is, Commissioner Willie, I know that you're going to be chairing next week's meeting when we have a regular session. So we will also have just a very brief overview with the website on it in your script so that after public comment, should it come up again, that you have the information to be able to share with the public.
And I just want to make sure we're clear. You just said that the ones that have been received that are specific, the county is providing to the Secretary of State for.
Correct. And we are going to be sending an email from the county just explaining this to the Secretary of State, just so that they're aware that we will be forwarding these moving forward. Yes.
Clarification, I don't believe I've received anything individually.
We've been getting them in public comment.
In public comment,
Yes.
okay.
This is regarding public
That's-
comment.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's what I
I
was gonna
did
say.
see that. Okay.
There've been probably 3 weeks worth of some specifics. that
Yes,
Should
yes.
be investigated.
I also wanted to say that the National Weather Service has issued an extreme heat watch earlier today in anticipation of dangerously hot conditions from Sunday morning through Monday evening. Temperatures are forecasted to be in the high 90s or even higher on those 2 days, with cooling only down to the mid 60s in the evening. Thankfully, the forecast calls for lower temperatures by the middle of next week. Emergency management plans to coordinate with our partner agencies this week and over the weekend to support public information about staying cool and to monitor the situation in case it worsens. Staff will pass along more information to your board as confidence grows in the forecast this week. You can also check Washington County's primary webpage for hot weather events at staycoolwashingtoncounty.com.
Thank you. Judy.
Nothing from me, Chair Harrington.
Great. So you've been forewarned. We have 2 executive sessions, and as they are estimated, we will go till the 5 o'clock hour. At this juncture, I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn to executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660, sub 2, sub D, for the purposes of discussing labor negotiations. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please vote by raising your hand or saying aye. Thank you, Commissioners. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously, 5-0. We're hereby in executive session, and everyone not involved with this discussion, please